Hi everyone, it's Kitty Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I just completed a really interesting conversation with Jeffrey Napolsky of swimminglessonideas.com. I hope you enjoy what is a wide-ranging conversation. We touch on everything from tot docs to goggles to what types of roles and responsibilities somebody should have when they're overseeing swimming lessons from the pool deck, like your deck supervisors, to ratios and his curricula that's offered through his website, including free resources for games, and just a really, really great conversation with somebody who is clearly still very passionate about swim instruction and water safety. I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, everyone. It's Kitty Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I'm continuing on with these different interviews with colleagues in the aquatic industry who've taken different paths and are doing different things that can really impact the way our industry is growing and improving. And a couple of weeks ago, I came across a really interesting website that I'm excited to share with you today. I'm here with Jeffrey Napolski from swimminglessonideas.com. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in aquatics?
Absolutely. So I started swimming as a kid, just in swim lessons. I remember my first memory of camp swim lessons. They told me I had leveled out of everything and I could be a teacher. And I was like 5 or 6. And that meant me sitting on the side, not swimming, which was kind of not fun. But then in high school, I worked at an outdoor pool. I worked there for 7 years in summers, taught swim lessons, actually started a community swim team there, and then like a feeder program for a swim team. And then went to college and then worked in aquatics for a while. So I got aquatic director, aquatic stuff for about 15 years. And then I was a head developmental swim coach for 12 years with a level 4 USA swimming team. And then now I'm an aquatic manager for a park district. So overseeing 2 outdoor pools and indoor pools, pretty much like at this point, almost 30 years of time spent teaching swim lessons or involved in it.
I'm sure during that time, both with your competitive swimming background and with the different facilities you've worked at, you've had exposure to a variety of different swim curricula and things like that.
You would think so. Mostly Red Cross or variations of Red Cross, Starfish, some of that. But yeah, like a little bit. Yeah, so I would say so. Yeah, a lot of watching people swim and teach swim lessons. It's because I was a lifeguard the whole time too. So a lot of that, as you know, as a lifeguard, can be very boring. And if you're not paying attention to the water and what people are doing, you need to find something to stimulate yourself. So spent a lot of time watching people teach lessons and thinking, I wonder if we can do things a little differently.
I want to chat a little bit about your website because I stumbled across it. I had actually bookmarked it from a while ago and I came
Great.
back to some bookmarks. And the thing that really grabbed me right away was the use of tot docs, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I wanted you to share a little bit about your website, the genesis of it, kind of how people use it, for those who might not be familiar with it.
It originally started as a repository for writing swim practices and just kind of swim lessons. A place where I could store all of the swim games that I was playing or learning about, or just strategies and tools. And then it evolved into a training program and an alternative level structure that if you talk to anyone that is in aquatics and they work with Red Cross, which is kind of the broadest agency for teaching swim lessons and swim lesson criteria or curricula, it's very, very like extensive, like getting in and out of the water. Can you walk in chest deep water? And a lot of that is superfluous skills. So if you're an instructor and you're testing that out on testing day, you're just checking boxes and you're not really paying attention. So there's a need to adjust that. So that's kind of started doing that and then integrating it into the programs I was running and then sharing it with other people. And it's kind of evolved into 600 to 700 different people using it or agencies using it. One notable one is the U.S. government uses it in Guantanamo Bay, which is kind of fun, interesting. So there's a bunch of different, it can replace Red Cross level structure or one of the other big national ones if you wanted to, which people were doing anyways. And then so training materials to support that and training instructors. And generally, in my life as an aquatic manager or aquatic director or something, training other people to do their job well is not easy. I mean, it's a really hard task. So providing tools and online materials to help that is kind of what the website does. So it focuses on fun and effective instruction. So that's kind of the thesis statement or the goal. And then making the lessons really actionable and productive. So fun, but productive. So minimizing the amount of downtime. And then there's a bunch of different training resources that provide that. So lesson plans are the big things, like what do I do in a day-to-day lesson? And from someone who doesn't have the years and years of experience and trial and error and just in knowledge that I have about swimming, how do you get that to someone that is 15, 16, 17 and showing up for 4 hours or 2 and giving a quality lesson? So lesson plans, online training materials, podcast. Mainly it's games, and that's the draw, is sharing those games and challenges with everyone, and hopefully building that toolbox or that tool chest so that other people can benefit from those things as well.
Can you speak a little bit to the framework in the US with whether it's Red Cross or currently with becoming a swim instructor? Because speaking here in Canada, we used to have the Canadian Red Cross. They got out of the swimming lesson program industry about 2 years ago because it was no longer financially viable for them. But speaking as a trainer, one of the challenges that we had here, and what I think I'm hearing you say, is that period between certification and experience, it's a very steep learning curve. So is that kind of the part of the gap that you were trying to fill, is accelerating that sort of those green years, or what? How do you see the gap currently in the certification that U.S. swim instructors achieve?
Sure. So it's a hard question because certification is not a requirement to teach swim lessons. So if you are teaching a swim lesson at a park district or a private company, they say they train you, they say you certify you, but there really isn't a requirement for it. There's no, unless you're going to brand yourself as we are this in order for marketing to bring people in. So there's no set requirement. So there's no standard. You can be Red Cross or not. If you want to be a Red Cross, you have to pay them for every registration you do, and then WSI and all that, and the whole framework for that. Or you can just iterate on Red Cross and use it without licensing it. So there's that. And then it really doesn't impact the registrations that I see in different communities, because most people learning how to swim have no idea. Like, they don't know what Red Cross is versus Canadian Red Cross versus Starfish, Goldfish, all the for-profit ones as well, or Swimming Ideas, like if you're going to use my program as well. So what they care about is, did the kids learn? Does it look like they're doing something? Are they having fun? And are they ISR even? So that's, sorry, tangent. But like, are they having fun? Are they being productive? Can they learn how to swim? That's what the parents care about. And they don't really care about the nuance of the levels or whatever. They want it to be easy, clear, and make sense in a way that they can relate to, especially if they don't know how to swim. So when it comes to like, what does that certification structure look like and the need for it, it's really individually based on what program is providing good quality training, and then what program is doing the things that the training enforces or suggests. So if you're Red Cross, you can have a great program in one town and a terrible program in another, just based on who is like administering that program and who's enforcing things and not. I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but it's kind of it's a hard thing to tackle. So offering the Swimming Ideas like level structure and lesson plans and stuff is a way to kind of fill an emptiness where it's not as onerous as like a Red Cross training or as specific. You can kind of pick and choose, and it's really pared down into that 20% of skills that get the 80% of results.
I mean, honestly, my question was kind of money, so you did the best you could with that. Yeah. It's really interesting to hear that there are areas where in the U.S. where people wouldn't need to be certified or aren't certified. And I'm not so naive to think that there's not parts of Canada where people are running, maybe at a campground pool, they're doing some sort of camp that week, or at a lake for a youth group. But generally speaking, I would say, working in this industry a long time as well, generally the provinces do legislate minimum training for swim instructors, or at least minimum time lengths or minimum accreditation ages. And I'm aware of one facility in my province, Alberta, currently that's getting a lot of flack for not doing that because there is no training requirement specifically in Alberta. And it's very, very new to encounter a facility that completely is bypassing the traditional legacy swim instructor training courses. So to that point,
that's interesting.
What kind of feedback have you heard about people who sometimes may feel nervous about doing anything outside of those legacy curricula, or, they've been coached that you have to use a certain framework or it's dangerous or risky?
Sure. To be honest, I haven't heard any of that, honestly. So I'm in Illinois near Chicago, and as part of my job, I network with the Illinois Parks and Recreation Association. And so we talk about all the different agencies in Chicagoland that use different swim lesson programs. And I would say a full half don't follow a national agency. So there's no set, you're Red Cross or nothing. It's half of a full half or nothing. So it's an in-house program or it's a variation of that. So from my point of view, I haven't seen any pushback at all. I would say look at the quality of the content of it and evaluate it based on that. There are certification agencies. So the Make a Splash with USA Swimming will certify or endorse. There's a number of other things like the Aquatic Alliance, I think, Swim Instructor Alliance. But are you looking at your program and does it make sense? If you're teaching something wildly insane or traumatic, then it should get pushed back. But if it's in line with everything else, which Swimming Ideas is, I don't think you should get any pushback. I personally haven't seen any at all.
No, that's really exciting to me because I think, unfortunately, in Canada, the way our industry is set up, we are a much smaller country, obviously 38 million people. And it was basically a duopoly for many, many years. And it still remains that way to an extent where we have the Life Saving Society has historically been the training source for all lifeguarding. And then they got into swim instruction about 25 years ago. And then the Canadian Red Cross historically was the swim instructor curriculum, the lessons that we all went through. And then that just disappeared 2 years ago. And so now we have one agency officially. One agency officially. And speaking as somebody who works in the private for-profit sector, I mean, competition is good for everyone in terms of having choices. What's suitable for municipality is not necessarily suitable for a private swim school. But even when I was still a municipal pool manager or a swim instructor trainer, there would be pushback I would experience just, in the pool deck office kind of thing, talking about, well, where is that activity you did in the framework of the lesson plan? Why are you inventing something, even if it meets the purpose? There's, I think, a bit of a herd mentality that is supported in some areas that it may be, again, dangerous or risky to be independent. And I think it's really positive if that's not the case in your region, that people are more independent in their thinking.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said, with lifeguarding, if it's not in the book, it doesn't exist, which, that's lives are on the line. And you can argue that with swim lessons too. But when it comes to teaching, I don't, if it's not on the lesson plan, part of what I try to train with people is to use the lesson plan as a training wheels. And then once you know what you're doing, stop using the lesson plan. It's a reference guide and a tool to get you to a point of mastery so that you can individualize your feedback and activities in a way that's effective and fun. If you're always doing the same one because it's on the lesson plan, that just seems counterproductive, and when it comes to teaching, you have to go at it from different angles. You can't do the exact same thing every time. So yeah, it is exciting. Yeah.
Different kids, different facilities, right? Different personalities, even. I know there's one organization near me, a very large municipal facility, and they literally do the same lesson on the same day. So if it's day 2 of level 2, everybody's expected to follow the laminated card.
I
similar
mean,
to some of the
yeah.
franchise models now in swim
Hmm.
schools. And I've always thought about, the consistency. Yeah, that's great, but that's only 30 or 40%, in my opinion, of the deliverable.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
instructors are probably bored out of their mind.
Yeah.
How can you do that?
And where's their energy and enthusiasm or their opportunity to grow and improve? Like, yeah. I also just want to say that, like, training is important. Like, I do think that, like, having, mandated training hours, that's well and good. But, like, if you're going to run an effective swim program, you have to be training your staff. And if you're not training them, then you're effectively just saying, do whatever you want. We don't care. So training is really important. And I hear what you're saying, but yeah, that strict adherence to everyone doing the same thing all the time, standardization is good, but you have to have a flair and a flavor for your personality too.
One of the things that always comes to mind for me as well is exactly what you were describing. Is you can't just check the box. You can't just do front float, they put their face in. There is going to be times where there's elements that are missing that we need to teach. And one of the gaps that I would see both as a facility manager, pool manager, and instructor trainer is some of our new instructors coming up wouldn't know how to fill those gaps. So how
Mm-hmm.
can I figure out one of the, how can I figure out how to teach this thing they're missing? So one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that comes to mind for me that I saw in your illustrations was, using a tot dock, for example, as a shallower part of water. And in the Canadian Red Cross program that I would see in the past, it would basically be kids going up and down in the water, and they wouldn't know to put their ear in to extend their arm down and be able to reach a ring sooner. And so I
Mm-hmm.
really, really appreciated that, we should be using different ways to achieve the same outcome. But some people, they literally don't think, okay, turn the head or turn the body.
And it seems so obvious, right? Like, if you watch a kid play, that's what they do, is they kind of like strain and then they kind of lean down. Why would we stand in the way of that and be like, no, you must have your back straight and your knees bent? And
Well,
yeah,
and one of
yeah.
the things I love about your website is that I would assume the documents are living documents. You can make some quick changes and upload new files, or you can upload, improvements or ideas that you have. Whereas I
Mm-hmm.
would find here in Canada, it was such a large organization, it would take 7, 8 years to have a significant program revision. So for a long time, for example, we had a big gap between two levels. One was called Sea Turtle, which was very, very young preschoolers, familiarity with the water, and
Mm-hmm.
Salamander, which was unassisted floats and glides. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was a big gap. We needed an intermediate level. You would get in trouble if you made up your own level, but it took them a very long time to add in that progression. So,
Mm-hmm.
how have you found your teaching materials or program materials have changed over your career, or how you teach has changed?
Yeah, a more emphasis. So in the past, it was very similar to like a Red Cross kind of training program where it was, here are the skills and kind of do a smattering of each in somewhat logical format. And just to your point, that a smaller agency like me, or a private person or a private company, they can iterate really quickly and make changes. And then a larger national agency, they have to take time and roll it out slowly. So there's that benefit of having that agile kind of response. And then just to speak to that as well, is with the Swimming Ideas website and materials and the lesson plans, it's a starting point, and it's a place where, if you, let's say if you had a program and you wanted to use it, you can rebrand it yourself, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be branded, Jeff Swimming Ideas. It can be Katie's awesome swim program. You just change the logo. You can edit a few things, because I give you those files to do that. So if you want to make those changes, great. Like, if you want to follow what I'm presenting and helping with, that's awesome too. When it comes to how it's changed, the biggest change, I think I would say, is that the lesson plans use a formula now, and it's activity one, activity two, challenge. And that's kind of built into every single level, and everything from parent taught to guppies, that bridge class between like going underwater, not going underwater, and then levels 1 through 4, even swim teams. It's even in our training. So for our new swim instructor training, there's a 8-day block, or a 8-step 6-hour in-person block plan. It follows the same activity challenge formula, and that works really well, because you can do a learning activity, a related learning activity, and then you do a challenge or a game, and that kind of resets that deliberate focus and that deliberate practice. And so you have a period of really intense work and effort, followed by a release where it's a game or an activity that's related to swimming in some fashion. And challenges are exciting because if you fail, you get another chance to do it. Once you overcome it, it's really fun. Like doing something that you couldn't do before is really exciting and rewarding. And that reinvigorates the swimmers to get excited for the next challenge, but also now they've had this fun and this, dopamine rush from success. Now they're ready to meet the next learning challenge. So then we can do, 10 streamlines, and they're not going to be bored because they just played a game or a challenge that was related to that in some fashion. So I would say that's the biggest change over time, is integrating this formula for swim lessons and learning, and putting it into the lesson plans and the training materials.
I love what you said about having a challenge and kind of a goal to a concerted effort, because I've often thought that, with younger levels or younger ages, let's say ages 6 to 10 or 11, it is continuous evaluation and we see progress week over week or class over class. But
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there is some benefit, exactly like you said, of having a challenge or having, not making it scary like a testing day, but hey, we're working up to this, we're going to try and do this next week, or we're going to try our best next week, because the kids
Mm-hmm.
have no sense of when it matters to, maybe they can give it a little bit more effort or a little bit more energy. And I think sometimes that's a key piece that's missing, that in that
Mm-hmm.
continuous evaluation, the kids never knew when they were being evaluated and never had their opportunity to really try their 100% effort.
Yeah, that's fair. And I would also say that, like, you know, my goal from watching swim lessons, if you're kind of in this like stale, stagnant, this is the national like standard, I'm following this lesson plan, there's really no buy-in. And they don't there's not a, from my remembering of Red Cross lesson plans, there's not a lot of like instruction on when to play a game. And then often you see like the last 5 minutes, let's play a game, which is essentially just a waste of time. Now you're
Mhm.
turning your lesson to 25 minutes instead of 30. And
Mhm.
so when parents are watching it, they're like, what the heck are they doing? That doesn't serve any purpose. Whereas if you are peppering in games and challenges throughout your lesson plan at regular intervals, you can say, hey, they're playing this game. It looks like they're laughing and doing nothing, but really what they're practicing right now is going underwater or learning to manipulate their body in a back float position underwater so they can push off and streamline. Or they're doing flips, but that's to prepare them for flip turns, or holding their nose or blowing bubbles with their nose. Like you can approach these skills sideways. It doesn't have to be, we're practicing flip turns. It's, we're going to do a challenge on how many flips you can do in 5 seconds, you know, and which is short enough so that they're not like holding their breath too long. Um, and then that's preparing them for flip turns, and they don't even know it. They're just having fun. So like that kind of thing should be, I think, emphasized in a swim lesson as well. So kind of a tangent, but
No, no, no. It just got me thinking, because I think games in general they go in and out of favor, it seems. And I don't know if that's regional or just here in Canada. But when I first started teaching lessons in college, I remember exactly to your point, I got hammered by a mom who said, every week you spend the last 4 minutes playing games, and that's come out to almost an hour's worth of swim instruction over the last semester. And
mm-hmm.
it was a very instructive moment for me, that I thought my games had a purpose. If they
Mm-hmm.
did, it wasn't apparent to the parents, which was my own mistake. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I was a new swim instructor and probably didn't have the best lesson plan. And kids love games, and so
Yep.
you think you're taking one for the team, and then it comes back to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
But then more recently, it seemed with the predominance of some parents being very focused on achievements and levels and badges and ribbons, that I've heard the opposite from some facilities, where they will actually get complaints if there's any games in the lesson, or if there's not enough games, because parents want their kids to have a break from that structure in school where they're working so hard. So you can please some, but you can't seem to please anyone at this point with games.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, I would say your game should be fun and effective. They should be brief but powerful. Like, have a clear purpose. And then if anyone asks, you'd be like, oh yeah, they're working on this skill. It looks like a game, but they're literally working on this one targeted skill. And it's super effective at teaching that.
Can you talk a little bit about your philosophical opinion in your program and materials about goggles? Are they incorporated, not incorporated? That's another one that's been very popular discussion here in Canada recently.
Yeah, so we don't talk about it at all. I don't think it matters either way, to be honest. If you want to use them, great. If not, don't. Ask anybody on a swim team, do they wear goggles? The answer is going to be yes. If you spend an hour in the pool, they're going to wear goggles because it's easier to do everything else when you're not worried about seeing. In swim lessons, you like, if you're looking at it from a safety perspective, and like if someone falls in the water, they need to not be able to panic and open their eyes. Like, I get that. So like, we don't really talk about it unless we're doing 50s and 100s distances. Then put a pair of goggles on. But if you're just in swim lessons, like, use them or not, it's individualized to such a degree that to prescribe it at like here, like, if I, like, my goal is to help people that are running programs run their swim lesson programs well. So I want to share materials that are going to make the aquatic manager's job easier and the swim instructor's job easier and more effective. So teach better lessons is really the goal here. Fun and effective swim lessons. And why would I prescribe you must have goggles on? Like, does the kid want to wear goggles? Like, my daughter's 3. If I throw her goggles on, she flips out. But if she chooses to put her own goggles on, she loves it. So
I love what you said, that the curricula can be customized or adjusted. I think a lot of communities, speaking more rural communities that I've worked with, they have very unique challenges, whether it comes to larger families in a religious community or single parents in an absent workforce community, different maturity. When I worked in one community, kids were, babysitting their siblings at 9, which I would never have seen in the city, but they did out in the country. So making adjustments for what one particular region or facility needs, I think is so encouraging to hear, because on the flip side, some of these legacy programs, it's, it's proprietary. You can't change this. You're breaking your affiliate agreement if you do that.
Yeah. And then you're losing the marketing and the weight of word that goes with being in that market, that agency, right? So yeah, I mean, I get it, but still, I mean, I would not enforce goggles unless there was a reason to.
No, I agree with you completely. It's just been a recent conversation because one particular facility sort of in my area requires goggles, and the comment somebody said is it because they require goggles or because they can sell goggles to every parent who walks
That's
through
a good
the door?
point. Yeah.
Right?
Or is their water quality so bad that you can't open your eyes and you need them because the chloramines are so high? Like,
well, and
maybe that's
that was exactly
problem.
another place. So I want to talk a little bit about tot docks, because I love tot docks. My first pool I worked at was an Olympic pool at the University of Toronto. We had no real shallow end. And so we used tot docks. For those people who might not be aware, it's basically a metal table, a structure that is put into the pool to elevate the depth so it's shallower. I love them. I think they make a huge difference in that progression where, speaking just in metric for a moment, you might have like a 7-year-old kid whose chin is barely out of the water at 1.5 meters or 3.5 feet. And you can get the shoulders out and they can progress so that they're not terrified, or you can work with preschoolers. Can you talk a little bit about tot docks and how you use them in your program?
Yeah, tot docks are amazing. So we call them benches, tot decks, whatever you want to call them. They're all essentially the same thing. We make our own. They're out of PVC pipe and a thick plastic. It's a clear see-through plastic. I think it's an 1.5 inches, and it's clear so you can see through the bottom, so it doesn't present a safety hazard. And they're light enough to remove and get out pretty easily with 1 to 2 people, and they're really easily repairable because it's just PVC pipe. It's just plastic. You drill holes in it, it fills up with water, and it sinks to the bottom. And then when you pull it out, the holes drain the water. So we use them in every pool, even in a 0-depth pool, like a beach-like front. We use them because once you start getting a little deeper, they're amazing. They can be used in so many different orientations and uses. For the Olympic pool you taught in, you have to have it. Like, you're wasting precious time if you have everyone grabbing the wall and going to the instructor one at a time. You can get one deck per class and start automating doing endless circle swimming with 4-year-olds if you wanted to, or 5-year-olds. They can streamline to the bench and streamline back to the wall and then move over and just keep going and going. So they are integral into the swim lessons that I talk about and offer and guide through. You can put 2 of them together and now you have like an island, or one of my instructors calls it a cage. So you can cage them and then you can have 3-year-olds just walking around in circles. And, they're so diverse. You can use them in so many different ways. They are a profoundly useful teaching tool, especially when confronting the challenges of swimming pools, because swimming pools aren't all built for swim lessons. Some of them aren't, you're using them multi-purpose. So there's lap pools that you're using for swim lessons, or there are recreational pools that you're also using for swim lessons. They're not all private, strip mall swimming pools that are built for 91 degrees, like water temperature and lessons. But those even use the top deck. So they're an essential tool in my opinion. And if you're not using them, you're really missing out.
I think it's a bit cultural and regional here. So I live in Western Canada in Alberta. And when I moved out here in 2013 from Ontario, I was working in Toronto. We used Tot Docs in Toronto because of exactly what you described. Older infrastructure that had not been built to work with preschoolers, and our programming wait lists required that we maximize our time. And so it was a no-brainer. When I came out here, some of the safety concerns that it sounds like you've eliminated in your design were described to me as why Tot Docs were so unpopular. So mesh on the bottom so that no kid ends up underneath the Tot Doc, which is obviously a much bigger issue than the Tot Doc if you're letting your kids somehow end up underneath the Tot Doc.
Yeah, my gosh. Yeah.
Then there was the concern with lifting them out of the pool, because I certainly had to do the steel or aluminum ones that could chip the coping, that could, you could strain your back if you didn't let them drain. And then the next piece I was hearing was, well, they need to have rails because the kids are going to fall off the Tot Docs. And so all of that kind of precipitated a couple year period, 2013, 2014, 2015. I swear everybody threw them out. Everybody got rid of them. And it's never made sense to me, because exactly what you described, I would use them for my kids transitioning from a 5 to a 10 meter distance swim. The slope would drop off. And so very easy, set up the island, swim to the island. I can assist in the middle, kind of transitioning those kids who are struggling to make that distance. But I know the strong ones can do it, have a little rest, count to 30 and go back. And it really, but every time I did it, people would say, well, where is that in the lesson plan? How do you know to do that? And that creative thinking was really scary for some pool managers I worked with.
It sounds very stifling, honestly, and hard to work under, because, what's the incentive then to improve and do better and do something more effective? I'll say that the Tot Docs we use have 3-sided rails. So they're oblong, like a rectangle, and then they have the top, the bottom rail, and the long rail, and then one open end. So when you swim in, you're caged in 3 sides, and then you can only swim out one side. You can go over it because it's not huge, but I think those are better than the Tot Decks that just have like the platform with the single thing sticking up in the middle. Because then, to that point, they can fall off on any side, and that's a little less reliable. I like the caged in, the 3-sided ones with the railing on the side, but that's such a bummer. It's like you can't use something that's such a great tool because it's not in the lesson plan. You're like, then why are we using the lesson plans? Like, I know you might get audited and stuff, but like still, like
I think that's the fear mongering is speaking as when I formed my company, I did get an affiliation with the Canadian Red Cross, and I can speak only to the affiliate agreement I signed at the time I did that, which then changed. But it was 40 pages covering things like, using logos and coloring and font. But it was also in terms of how your facility represents an agency. And it's very interesting because I see this now more and more as a private sector company that, you can push it as far as you want in terms of making people jump to what you ask them to do. But
Mhm.
if I think about as an industry, the pushback that facilities should have, some of these requirements of, you'll never do anything outside of our curricula, or you'll never use any equipment that's not approved, or you'll never just, it stifles innovation, like you've been saying. And it
Mhm.
also means we're not providing those skills to our instructors or our swimmers to think creatively.
Yeah. Or giving them the opportunity to think creatively.
Mentioned you have over 600 organizations or
Yeah.
individuals using your curriculum, your resources. You've got the
Mhm.
website, you have a podcast. We also didn't hit on the book yet,
Sure.
but how do people find you, or how do people get connected? What
Yeah.
are you hearing?
Yeah, so normally it's through games. So people are so the website, you can look at the data metrics and all the hits and the stuff. I'd say 90% of traffic comes from people looking for swimming games. And I'm pretty sure that the list I've got on swimmingideas.com/games is the most comprehensive list of games you can find online right now. And that's kind of my
Mhm,
goal, is I want to share that
mhm,
toolbox of games. And there's a lot of challenges, because that's the new push for, by new I mean like the last 7 years. That's the push for me, is to kind of reframe swim games into challenges, because they're less structured and more targeted and more skill connected than just a nebulous game. But game is the word for it. So that's how people usually find swimming ideas. And then from there, they kind of just look around. They're like, oh my gosh, like, this is what I've been needing. I want something that tells me how to do this skill in a way that makes sense, and in a way that isn't a prescription that it has to be done this way. Like, there's a good way to do it. That we know that it's not that complicated. Swimming is a set choreography of dance moves, essentially, and you're following them in a specific way. And it's easier to learn it incrementally in small pieces than it is all at once. So, chunking out that complex skill and breaking it into smaller pieces is kind of the training that I provide. So then it's like people look for lesson plans. They're like, oh, I need a new, different lesson plan that, maybe I'm not confident enough to come up with it on my own, but I can follow someone else's lesson plan. And so then we offer those. And
mhm.
then, and then as a business owner, you probably know this too, but like, you want your message in different areas and mediums. So you have your YouTube channel, and I'm sure you do other things as well. But like the um, teaching swimming on a workbook is a training workbook. It's for swim instructors, or it's for people that want to learn how to swim, and it teaches them I break it down to 15 essential swim skills, and it's going underwater to flip turns and open turns and all the 4 competitive strokes in between. And then the lesson coordinator handbook, how to run an effective swim lesson program. So if you're going to use the level structure we've come up with, what do we look at, and what are the things that you need to be paying attention to when you're watching staff teach lessons? And then how does that help you be a better manager? And then training plan, and then like, how do you do your job? How do you do a testing day? What is a quick test? What is a day of test? How do you do a drop-in testing? You mentioned the ongoing testing. How do you actually do that? Or how do you do a
Yeah.
testing? How do you structure that? And then so feedback on that. And then finally, the online community. So the Swimming Ideas is essentially a community website where I want to get feedback from everyone that's in the community, like you. What are you doing and what are you working on, and share with us, and create a place where we can do that. And there's online courses, because people like stuff online. So we have our swim instructors do the online course, and we use the workbook as a supplemental material. And then there's the books, How to Create Fun and Effective Swim Games, and How to Create Fun and Effective Developmental Swim Practices. So, people are looking for games, but I think it'd be nice if people knew how to create their own games. So that's where that
Mhm,
came from. So how do you create a game? That's a hard topic. I mean, how do I teach someone else to create a game? Like, okay, well, what do I do? And you have to
mhm.
think about, and then make it interesting to read. Like, it's a challenge too. And then same with the developmental swim practices. I coached 3 hours a day for 12 years. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to practice and try things and do things new and different and fail and learn from the assistant coaches I had, the people I mentored under. It so that's in that as well. It's kind of like, through my failures, here's what I've learned, and maybe you can benefit from that. And people have. Mostly, I think at this point, it's individual people that are teaching in their backyards or wanting to supplement their own instruction. I think the Canadians, I didn't quite realize how restrictive it was in Canada. And the Canadian clients, because I don't always know where they're from, but the few that I've had have kind of said, this is going to be a supplemental because I haven't gotten this kind of, and I love it. So I'm going to start doing it. And now I'm the best teacher in my program, and I get the most private lesson requests. And I'm like, yeah, because you're fun. Like, you're doing things that are great. So.
I mean, the landscape is shifting a tiny bit in Canada since the Canadian Red Cross went away. The Life Saving Society has a curricula that was officially endorsed as the replacement, but you are seeing independent municipalities who decided, you know what, this is not for us for whatever reason, and they said, we're going to go out and create our own curricula, or we're going to do our own research. And I think that's a great idea, speaking as a private enterprise business, but I know there's been a lot of pushback and a lot of, I would even say, fear mongering in some situations of, well, how do you know you're going to meet the standard of care because you're just inventing? Like, what qualifies you to make a swim program? And I think that's a little bit unnecessary, given that I remember back when I was in college, we all taught, sort of at the time, fly by night in people's backyards in the summer, and we knew what we were doing and it was fine. But that proliferation I'm seeing really start from those independent swim instructors who are renting out backyard pools or hotels and creating that. I would say even the consumer, for a long time, if it wasn't a branded curricula, the parents were concerned. And now they're starting to understand, just because I haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not a good program if I see results in my kids' improvement and their confidence around water or their ability to swim.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that Yelp or Google, the reviews, that didn't exist, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago. So we didn't have that peer evaluation or review structure or help. And, you can game those things, but like, you're not going to go to a swim lesson program that has like 1 star and you're like, my kids didn't do anything for 30 minutes. They just sat there while the instructors talked. Like, that's a problem of management and like implementation. Who cares if they're in the agency program or not, if they're not following the basic interaction, So yeah, I think to your point, yeah, it's a great opportunity to start opening it up.
Well, and to your point as well, you couldn't go anywhere else, right? Like, we have very few franchise swim schools in Canada. I know the US market is booming. Running a swim school of any type is a very, very hot franchise model, as I got in my recent issue of Entrepreneur. But here in Canada, I would say on paper, there's less than 50 franchise swim schools in the whole country. Wow. So it's still an emerging market for us. And it's starting with people, like, it sounds like, clients on your website saying, look, I know I can offer something better. I don't need to be flashy about what it is. It just, parents see the results and they see progress with their kids. And I love that so much of what you have is online, and some of it's behind a paywall, but not all of it's behind a paywall, because I think that's a huge piece that I'm discouraged to see fewer organizations really recognizing that different swim instructors, whether it is Gen Z or whether it is older people, are going to Google, and there's not a lot of good quality content on Google outside of websites like yours.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. But yeah, that's the goal. Like, 90% of it should be free, in my opinion. And, the stuff that isn't is like the hardest stuff to make, that takes the most time. And then you have to make money somehow. So like,
for sure,
the downloadable lesson plans. And the thing is, you can download them and keep it. Like, I'm not going to hunt you down. There's no watermarking. There's no time gated stuff. If you drop a membership, you can't download it, because that's kind of the deal. It's like, download it before your membership expires, but then you got it and you have everything. And then if there's an update, you can resubscribe. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that is the goal, is to make it, it's not me selfishly saying, do this my way or only. It's, hey, this works really well and I think it's awesome, and I want to share that with people.
Well, and I've experienced that a little bit with my business to the extent that things that I think are, quote, common knowledge are not common in all markets or in all facilities. And it's, for me, it's been scale, whether it's YouTube or Instagram. I started out on Instagram doing a lot of educational posts about equipment I was seeing, or,
Hmm.
quote, hacks, you know, like adding tape to your spinal board to help landmark head positioning.
Oh, that's
Like,
a
I
great
didn't
idea.
invent that,
Hmm.
but how do you get that if you're in your small community and there's not another pool for an hour and a half away and your
Yeah.
boss doesn't support industry networking?
Hmm.
It's just sharing that knowledge because it all benefits our industry. But recently I've been a bit more cynical because people seem to be just a little bit more less giving with their time, I think,
Yeah.
than they could be,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Given that we all benefited from mentorship and other people's efforts when we got started.
Yeah, I was just talking to a member right before this actually, and he was saying that he really struggled. I have a weekly mentorship meeting, so if you're a subscriber, you can be part of that. And he was saying that he struggles with connecting with local industry people in Massachusetts, and he's like, I don't know why. And I was saying to him that people are busy, like they're in their world. Unless you're coming like with something to offer and you're the one driving it, they're gonna, it's not nothing personal, they just are so overwhelmed. And in aquatics, I mean, this too,
Mm-hmm.
they're staffing, programming, facility, everything in one person, whereas other places have multiple team members for those things, and diverse, so it's all on us. But yeah, that's networking is really important, and I'm learning that more and more now, which for a long time in my career I was just like, I don't care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna learn and talk and like watch and I'll absorb and everything. But it is really important to learn from that. I really like that idea about the tape on the backboard.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that, so why not? Like, it's not going to
Mm-hmm.
affect the Velcro, so I'm going to try that today
Mm-hmm.
actually. So thank you.
Yeah, just above and no, that I mean, and that's what
Yeah,
I like. I didn't invent it. Half the ideas I have come from other people,
yeah.
and so I never want to
Hmm.
take credit for something that I
Same here.
didn't invent. I just want to put it out there. But
Hmm.
I guess to speak to the point of the mentorship, I think it's especially bad right now, summer 2024. I know summer is usually bad. Aquatics, pool people are very, very busy. I'm accustomed to people not responding to emails or texts in a timely manner.
Hmm.
But I know my best friend who's a travel agent has just said recently, she's been in her role for 13 years. People are just barely holding on. They
Hmm.
can't see anything outside of their immediate sphere of influence. And so
Yep.
that fits with what I've been experiencing, where people are just not replying, not engaging, declining, ghosting, what have you. So I feel for that Massachusetts person because you're
Yeah.
putting your best foot forward and people are not matching your effort.
Yeah. And he's just like, I want help. I want to know what you guys are doing. So, yeah, yeah, I hear that too, and I see that in our area as well. Like, just a drop in engagement and even like participation. So yeah, it's pretty hard right now.
I want to circle back a little bit. You mentioned one of your books is to assist with people who are either supervising or organizing programs at an aquatic facility, because I know that that's been a big gap that I've seen here, where you started as a swim instructor at your facility, you do a really good job and you get promoted maybe to a senior swim instructor or some sort of casual deck coordinator to help kind of herd everyone around on swim lesson day, but
Hmm.
there's not any supplemental training, exactly to your point of what are we looking for other than, you know, Susie no showing to her lesson or little Jimmy smacking his teeth on the wall. What kinds of things do you think are well, let me rephrase that question. What kinds of issues or areas do you address in your book? Because I think that would be invaluable for a lot of pool people.
Yeah, so there's three sections and they're color coded, and this is the same for the teaching swimming, but it's purple, which is the different levels and the skills, the testable skills. And so it's really emphasizing what should the instructors be doing in their lesson during this level. So in a parent taught, what should the parent taught teachers be doing? Um, are they following a lesson plan? And then are they playing the songs and doing the games and activities? But like more than that, are they interacting with the parents? Like, it's a guide for the lesson planner to know what to look for. So engagement is a big thing. Shoulders in the water is a big thing. So that includes pictures of people doing it correctly and pictures of people doing it wrong. Because if we show what's wrong, it's a way of teaching what's right. Sometimes.
Mhm.
And so there's that. Then there's the middle section is the in-person training block plan. So that takes up a significant portion. And the green section, which is the last one, is how do you do your job? And that's diverse. So it's how do you handle a staff issue? What do you do? How do you lead with collaborative leadership? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And is as small as things like when you have a task to delegate, say, we need to do this, and can you do it with me? Or, John, can you gather a group of other swim instructors and accomplish this task within the next 5 minutes because we have lessons starting in 7 minutes? And that task can be, can you move the tot decks from the water to the side of the pool? But that's collaborative leadership, which isn't an explicit skill someone, I mean, it is, but like you need to teach it if you want to have a
Mhm.
good lesson
Mhm.
coordinator. So as an aquatic manager, you know, you don't necessarily have the time to do this every day or model it every day. So use this book, which helps do that for you ideally. Um, and that's just one of the aspects of that's in there. So, what does it mean to be professional? Is it okay to ask for questions? What happens when somebody asks you something you don't know the answer? And so the book talks about it's okay to say I don't know, and I'll get
Mhm.
back to you. And now that's contingent on do you actually get back to the person and answer the question? But you have to spell that out. So that's what that teaches and looks at. So it's kind of what is the structure of your lessons? There's pictures on with a model pool in it. Where do you put level one? You think
Mhm.
it's intuitive in the shallow end, but maybe it's not. Like you have to, kind of think about those things and those externalities. And part of the book is, identifying all those small things that go into decision making that you or I might see because of our experience that someone new into the position doesn't because they're overwhelmed by
Mhm.
just delivering the message correctly. So
Mhm.
it's helping point out those small details that come with experience but need to be addressed still.
And my philosophy on this has shifted so much in the last few years because I used to think we were teaching all of this in our deck modeling, maybe in our lifeguard roles or in our assistant supervisor roles. But I remember one of the last swim instructors I had as a municipal pool manager, we kept doing all the things we thought we were doing and it wasn't connecting, which made
Mm-hmm.
me realize that we weren't teaching him everything that he needed. Because it was funny at that time, I think it was 2018, 2019, he was always going to Google for lesson plans and for games, which in that framework at that time was not how we taught. Talk to a colleague, look in the
Mm-hmm.
binder, go behind the paywall of the Canadian Red Cross website.
Mm-hmm.
But his instincts were just different, and we've seen that shift so much in the last few years that I completely agree with you. Where do they get this information? We
Mm-hmm.
don't have the time to mentor all these new people we've necessarily hired since the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
All of that continuity of information is lost in some cases. We may not have that, aged up hierarchy that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
So where does it come from? Why not a
Mm-hmm.
book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the book is designed to be as general as possible. So specific enough to make sense, but not prescriptive for a specific location, but applicable to indoor, outdoor, large and small. And yeah, that institutional knowledge is really important, but if you're not codifying it somehow when that person leaves, like if you're in an agency and the person that knows everything is like, hey, I'm out, I'm retiring, and their supervisor never asked them to write down what they're doing, like what are you going to do, so having some baseline standard is helpful, and I think that's what the intention is to, for lesson coordinators that I work with, to do that, following the, it all hooks together. So it's like if you're using the teaching swimming, if you're using the level structure that we provide, if you're using the lesson coordinator handbook, it all kind of meshes together. The lesson plans, it's all meshed together, and that's by design. But if you're like a municipal in Canada that just wants to supplement your material, it's a good way to just, you can spend $30 and learn how to do a lot of these things that maybe you've never even considered before because no one's taken the time to kind of write it down, which takes time. It takes time from teaching a swim lesson or doing the schedule for your lifeguards.
Well, and I think to close the loop, because sometimes I have these open-ended thoughts, when I think back to that kid in 2018, 2019, at the time my thinking was, well, why is he going on Google? We have all these other resources. Whereas now my thinking will be, okay, his impetus is that he's going on Google to try and better himself or to look for additional resources.
Hmm.
And I think one of the culture shifts we need to have here in Canada is a lot of good pool people, whether they're lifeguards, swim instructors, coaches, they wait to receive advanced training from their facility through meritocracy,
Yep.
which is great to a point.
Hmm.
But something like your book or the website or online YouTube videos can be an opportunity for somebody who maybe has limited funds, but they want to, accelerate their improvement in their
Hmm.
facility or delivering programs or even achieve that meritocracy to get funding to go to a course. We should be encouraging people to do some of this themselves if they're really
Hmm.
motivated. You don't need your employer to buy this book for you.
Yep.
It's an investment in your own instruction, which will make your lessons more enjoyable, your feedback better. Maybe
Hmm.
you'll get better shifts, a better schedule based on
Hmm.
better quality instruction. So I think that's a shift that a lot of us hadn't made 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too. I also think like people are like water, so they're going to flow whatever's easier. If it's easier for that person in 2018 to go to the Google instead of behind the paywall, maybe they didn't have a login or maybe they lost
Mm-hmm.
their password, it could be that
He
easy.
would always lose his password,
Exactly, yeah.
100%.
So he's like, "Oh God, I can't ask again. So now I'm just gonna look it up online." So
Yep.
like, there's always that. But and like you said, at least he was looking. Like
Mm-hmm.
like so many people just don't care, and getting them to care is hard to like put in the
Mm-hmm.
investment and do it well. So when they are doing it, you want to reward that. Yeah, that's that's an interesting thing. Yeah.
So we've talked about your books a little bit. We've talked about the website. Can we
Hmm.
quickly hit on the podcast? You had
Yeah.
a podcast for 6 years. You
Maybe
took a
longer.
break
Yeah.
or time to move on. What's the podcast about?
So, I mean, coordinating with people is really hard, and scheduling people is really hard, and then finding the material and editing and all that. It's a lot of time commitment. So for a long time, I did it every week, podcast, mostly just a soliloquy kind of like speech kind of thing, and then briefly for a while getting into the interviews, um, and just life happened and it dropped off, and then I had a couple listeners that wanted a recap of how to start a developmental swim program. So I have a lot of material now on running or starting a developmental program and structuring it, and what is a swim lesson. What do the practice structures look like, and how are you going to set up your levels and stuff? So there's podcast episodes on that. But it's another one of those tools of how do we share that message of good quality swim instruction, fun and effective swim instruction to a population that may not get it from YouTube or a website, but they listen to podcasts. So it's a lot of fun to do and record, especially if you have good sound quality. And it sounds like you do, Katie, and I think you're doing an excellent job with this from the videos I've saw you do. So, but it is a lot of work. I mean, the work that goes into it is not to be understated, and the expense of it as well. So right now it's kind of on a hiatus. The priority is more on membership, Zoom meetings and mentorship meetings, where that podcast kind of lives today in a shorter format on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm.
Are some of those older episodes still available if somebody wants to go back and listen to that back catalog?
Yeah, everywhere. It's called the Swimming Ideas Podcast.
Perfect.
And it's on all the things. So it's hosted through Spotify. So it's wherever you can get a podcast, it's there. Apple, Google, Spotify, pretty much everywhere.
Do you think it's important for people to know that the podcast is still available? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
there's, for those municipalities or organizations, so in Canada, with that sudden switch where the Canadian Red Cross went away, there was only 12 months notice where people had to
Wow.
sign up for another curricula. And as you can imagine, this happened January 15th. So people
Wow.
have already programmed spring. They've probably
Mm-hmm.
programmed summer. They're
Mm-hmm.
working on fall. They
Mm-hmm.
can't get a new budget on January 15th.
Nope.
So a lot of people rolled into the endorsed alternative, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple years in, now they're saying, okay, we've worked with that and it's not working. So now we're going to go through the procurement process of seeking out if there are any alternatives, or we're going to consider what would be the timeline to do something ourselves. Kind of like when Class, the software, was going away. Some people just went to ActiveNet. Some people had the time and the money to shop around. And so in a circular way, what I wanted to say is those pool people here in Canada, or whoever's listening, who may be dissatisfied with what they currently have, could at least start the process of thinking about what alternatives could look like through listening to some of your podcasts, or even discussing them as a team to investigate alternatives.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's definitely guidance on how to run programs and lessons and what you need to think about. It's a big beast. I mean, a swim lesson program is a big thing, and it goes from messaging to training to rollout to standardization and accountability and progress. So yeah, it's a big thing. And we offer it. So we got it all. Like if you're interested, Swimming Ideas will give you that structure, and you can easily swap it in, and it's free. You don't need to be a subscriber to follow the level structure or even follow the training. Like you can just use the level structure. It's super easy. It's clear, I think. I mean, it's not complicated. It is if you don't know the terminology, but that's what the training materials are for. And that's what you would pay for if you wanted to do that. So we have ways to do it individually or as a group.
No, I think that's amazing. And I think that's kind of my feeling when I spoke with different pool managers. They were just so overwhelmed at the idea of starting such a big project.
Yeah.
In speaking to somebody who worked on the development of Virginia Swims, a state program, they said they met once a week for 8 hours over 7 months, right? And that was a struggle with, it was 7 or 8 people, and it was still a lot, she'd said, to exactly to your point, cover all those bases in terms of instructor development, levels, performance criteria, reporting, admin. And it's not to say someone can't do it, but I'm sure it took you years to get to the point where you're at now with your materials.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's not as robust. It did not happen overnight. It was a slow iterative process over time. And now I think it's in a really strong place that, we have 500 people a day that take lessons and 30 instructors that teach, that we follow this, and it's effective. It's great. There's progress. There's noticeable progress. People, travel through, and it's a feeder for swim teams, because that's kind of where my focus was for a long time. So if you're a swim team coach, and specifically a developmental swim team coach, which tends to be more profitable than swim lessons, you want to quickly move your swim lesson population into a more profitable swim team environment. It's 2 days a week or 4 days a week. It flows nicely into that. There's a clear progression into swim team. So that's what I was trying to say. But yeah, there is. It's a daunting thing, but there are resources on Swimming Lessons Ideas to make it easier.
That is one of the few things I think we are doing okay on here in Canada is our pricing. When I see these, usually they're sponsored or grants or subsidized swimming lessons coming through my Google News alerts in the summer. So I just saw one a few days ago. It was Syracuse, New York, $10 lessons.
Yep.
I have not seen swimming lessons under $50 for a session, probably since I was in college 20 years ago. So that's one of the few things. Everything in Canada is more expensive, that even a preschool swim lesson, 8 sessions, 30 minutes, you're looking at the low end, maybe $47
per lesson.
For the block, for the 8-hour session. So you're talking anywhere from $7 to $15 a lesson, but it's group, right?
Yeah,
I don't know what it's like in your area, but you can't, with wages and other things, you can't charge that little here in Canada.
It's like a luxury expense. So, I mean, then you have to balance that. Like, how many kids are you having in your groups? Like, what is your ratio standards? And I would say 5 is the absolute max that you could do for an instructor to swimmer ratio. But then you have to balance that out with wages and cost, and then lifeguards and pool expenses. Pools don't make a lot of money unless they're they're a fine-tuned machine.
Busy, fully programmed. And I would say that's one of the current feedback. So it's good to know about your recommended ratios or philosophically where you stand, because I would say that's one of the big differences between the Canadian Red Cross and the endorsed alternative. The Canadian Red Cross was 3 or 4 kids up to age 6, maximum of 6 kids, kind of up to age 10. I'm fudging the levels here, but 8 kids up to age 12. And then the alternative program now is very heavily equipment assisted. So a lot of PFDs, a lot of flotation devices, and their ratio is allowed up to 10-1, even at the lower ages, which is carte blanche, as we say at the YMCA, that needs to make money. And, you're putting 10 kids with a green 16-year-old who can barely manage 10 kids, never mind 10 really young kids, and would be a challenge even for me with my, 10 years of experience. I don't want 10 kids. What can I achieve in 30 minutes with 10 kids?
Essentially nothing. You're focused entirely on safety at that point, like not drowning your children. So that's kind of scary. I mean, yeah.
Well, and it is. Yeah. The dry administrators, they look to the affiliate guidelines, right? Or the lesson plans would have those ratios as sort of, a justification to allow those ratios, and spoken to a lot of people over the last couple of years, really frustrated when they're trying to cap at 6 or 8, because people will walk off the deck. I'm not teaching this. And on paper, it says up to 10.
Wow. That's a challenge. I don't know how you do anything at that point. What I can't really comment. It just sounds terrible.
No, it's water-based babysitting, really.
Yeah, it is.
Or like playgroup.
Yeah.
It's really, or it ends up being, the kids who are shining get some opportunities unfairly, and the kids who are squeaking in the sense of being a safety risk or really high need, they get the bulk of the instructor's attention. And then the kids in the middle really don't necessarily get the opportunity to practice. But I think that's probably informs kind of the framework I was sharing with you, where thou shalt do the lessons and activities that we give you. They don't solve those high volume issues, but they're guided towards that.
See, it's funny, while you're talking and describing this, I'm thinking, okay, how can we solve this problem? Which is like where, swimming ideas came from. And I'm thinking, all right, let's just get 4 tot decks, but wait, you can't use those. Like we'll put 5 on each, and then an instructor on the middle, and they can watch them both go. And maybe we can do some semblance of a lesson, but that's not in the lesson plan. So you can't do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do you do anything? Well,
it's a real challenge right now in our industry. If you take, the pandemic, all of that information loss that I mentioned, shifts in the industry in terms of, I don't personally feel that there's a lifeguard shortage in Canada. I feel there's a shortage of organizations willing to pay what they need to pay to have a full complement of staff.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree.
And so then you're looking for all these organizations. They'll reach out to me more as a management consultant and say, how do I fix this problem? Well, you don't want to pay more. You don't want to decrease your ratios. You don't want to add a second or an assistant instructor. And we haven't even gotten into pool space, where you're giving them like 2 lanes, which is completely unreasonable for a class where they have very little forward movement. It's crowded. The parents are unhappy. Everybody's unhappy. Your reviews are bad. Your customer service reps are getting yelled at. I mean, where do you even start? Right. So it's very overwhelming.
It's like, you want me to snap my fingers, but you're unwilling to do anything. That doesn't mix. Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah. How do you overcome those conversations? Like, where do you start? Are you like, you got to do something?
I mean, honestly, recently, a lot of people have just been walking away in the sense of they don't want to have those conversations. They're looking for a silver bullet, or they're looking for advice, and then they choose not to follow it. It's a bit discouraging in that sense of, you think similar as a business owner as you are too, where people make it to your website, they go through your messaging and hopefully a couple places. They self-select that, yes, this is for me, this is the right person, this is what I want. And then you set up a meeting or a conversation or a site visit. And then they just at that point decide, oh yeah, she's not right, or it's too much, or it's too complicated. I would say there's never been more a time when people are not actually looking for solutions. They're looking just for salve on their problem.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. Like, give me the Band-Aid to fix, or the quick pill, or the my spouse is in healthcare, and the Ozempic is the big thing, and it's like, just take a pill, like just give me the pill, doctor, and fix my swim lesson program. And you're like, no, you have to do stuff. So I hear that. It's hard work.
Well, and I was going to say that's the other piece I would just say is to circle back to what I said earlier. It just seems like everybody's tired and burnt out and unwilling to put in a modicum of effort.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm speaking broadly. Not everybody is like this, but having done this now for 7 years, it does feel like we are in a moment where people just are not willing to give an inch
Mhm.
and they need a mile. Right.
Yeah.
So it's
Mhm.
it's not reconciling. And so I'll be interested to see when we get to this fall and next year. It's going to reach a breaking point in some situations, I think,
Mhm.
but I don't know how soon that will be.
So I do have to share that, I mentioned earlier that I'm in the Illinois Parks and Recreation Association, and we have an aquatics roundtable that we are part of for the park districts and the aquatic managers and directors. And I am super impressed by everybody that participates in that, because they approach it with, and Illinois and Chicagoland is a pretty large contingent of park districts and municipalities and villages and stuff that are running swim lessons and swim programs and summer pools and even all year round pools. Chicago Park District is part of it too, and they're quite the beast. And not to make you feel worse about where you're at right now with the people you're working with, but they're awesome. Like, they're kind of the opposite. They're like, what can we do? How can we share? What do we, we're going to have this shared like Google sheet that like, what are your operations like and how are you overcoming this problem? And oh my gosh, we had this thing going on. So there's pockets of people that do care, and it's exciting to get to work with them. And I think hopefully there's more of you, and as the cliche is, as your light shines, other people will shine too. So I'm hoping that happens for you and Alberta, because it sounds fairly rural, I think, is what you've been talking about, and those challenges, and hopefully that changes soon, because there are pockets of it. So it exists in
Well,
some places.
well,
Yeah.
and I think we will get back there.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, what you're describing is the US is typically, I would say, 8 to 12 months ahead of us on some
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So, just broadly speaking, and it's been very financially difficult for a lot of organizations in the last 18 months.
Absolutely.
We have a recession here, whereas maybe the
Mm-hmm.
US doesn't. And so hopefully what you're seeing is what we'll have next summer.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, a little bit of the pandemic burnout that some people had maybe in 2022, 2023
Mm-hmm.
has really landed for some people now. And
Got it.
so I was, like I said, I was really excited to find your website because
Thank
it was
you.
very exciting for me to see somebody who is, still excited about what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we've been doing this for so long, it's not exciting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And to see resources that can really supplement or supplant what people are doing if it's not working.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's the goal. Mm-hmm.
So any final thoughts? Let's start to wrap up here.
Yeah, no, just, my mission, my goal is to teach better lessons together tomorrow. That the effort and training materials is for fun and effective lessons. So whether you're doing a parent taught or guppies or beginners or advanced swimmers or swim teams, you can do it in a fun way. And having fun and being interesting and invigorated and productive go hand in hand. You don't have to sacrifice learning and productivity and progress in order to have fun. You can do both. So, and I want to share that message with as many people as I can. So the games list and the challenges list is free and available, so you can use it in your programs, in your lessons. And if that works for you and you jive with it, if you like it, we got training materials, we got other stuff for you to use. But really, to your point, and I think we spent a lot of time talking about this, is that solving problems is not easy, and it's unique to every person and swimmer. So that my goal, and I think your goal too, is to give people the tools to succeed in a way that makes sense. Whether that's within the confines and restrictions of a restrictive national program, or under the confines of a different program, an individualized program, but still having the freedom and opportunity to do something that fits the needs of the individual at that time. And having the freedom to fail too. Like, if you don't have a chance to try something new, how would you know if it works for you or not? Like, you have to fail, and sometimes your stuff doesn't work, and that's okay. You can move on as long as your effort is there and enthusiasm is there. So I think that would be the wrap up. And I do want to thank you, Katie. I think you've done a great job of kind of shaping this conversation. It's really hard to hear what your conversation person is saying and lead the conversation. I thought you did a great job with that. I'm really impressed. So well done.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the time you took to do this with me, because I can talk. I tell people, like, how long do you want to talk about swimming? Because I can talk for hours about swimming and swimming lessons and aquatics. So, there's no limit on how much I can talk about this, because I find it fascinating. So
that was the main purpose behind starting these YouTube videos. Is I was getting so frustrated by little 8-minute, 10-minute, 12-minute news clips or the same standard spiel on podcasts. Nothing against podcasts, but I am more of the type of person who could sit down for 3 hours and listen to a discussion.
Mhm.
In another browser tab right now, I have a 3-hour discussion that I was listening to before we got started about an airplane crash.
Wow.
And it's 3 experts that sit and they talk about stuff that I don't understand. I'm not an airplane person, but that level of detail and kind of casual conversation, I think, is really missing.
Yeah.
When I think about my colleagues, my clients, even the things I wish I could have learned, because conferences, in my opinion, are dying in the sense that people, having seen what we could do with hybrid and virtual, a lot of organizations have pulled back on funding in-person activities. And then a lot of the conferences don't want to offer hybrid or virtual. And so, speaking as somebody who was involved at several conferences, we were having lower attendance because people just couldn't spend $2,000 on one person anymore. And so for me, trying to fill that gap a little bit and give back to the industry is interacting with people like you or people who I encounter online who have such interesting stories. And maybe somebody in Canada has never heard of you or heard of your website, but if it helps 1 or 2 people, then that serves the purpose, right?
Yeah.
And it exists for posterity, so people can come back to it. And if it's discovered in 6 years, so be it, right? It's out there.
Yep.
So where can people find you? Give us all the publications again,
Sure.
who you are, where you are.
Yep. So my name is Jeffrey Napolski. Swimming Lessons Ideas. We're migrating to swimmingideas.com, so it'll be a slow process. But Swimming Ideas is essentially, if you search for that, you'll find me. Used to have Twitter, not so much anymore because it's kind of weird now.
Cesspool. Yeah.
So I'm like, don't like that anymore.
No. No.
Briefly tried Instagram, but Meta and Facebook. So really, it's just email, jeff@swimminglessonsideas.com, jeff@swimmingideas.com. And then the website. So if you join Swimming Ideas, it's free. You can direct message me and I'll respond. So I try to go out of my way to talk to people. I respond to emails all the time. So if you're interested in reaching out, you have questions about anything, that'd be the place. Or just where you linger but don't say anything, you stalk it. Lurking, yeah.
Lurking.
You want to lurk the Swimming Ideas website, membership, you can do that. You'll get the updates and kind of feedback, and you can vote on polls. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool platform. So it's on the Mighty Network platform, which is pretty exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's interactive. It's easy to use. So that'd be where I would send you, swimmingideas.com.
And then from there, people can also find the podcast that you mentioned, which is also on multiple podcast platforms. And people can go to Amazon and look you up as an author and order your books. I did look, they're also available on amazon.ca. So great resource for people who are looking. There's just not enough books in general in aquatics, I think, because so much of this, I know we have a fear of paper.
Yes, we do.
Truly, it makes sense. But some of these things, a good old-fashioned reference book is so good to have in the pool office, can be shared around.
And the last thing I'll say on that is that the Amazon printing quality, it's on the glossy color, is really nice. It's paper, but it feels really good. So it's a good quality of it too, especially for pool.
Very durable.
So, yep. It's not going to survive being dropped in the water, but it's nice.
The one hack I tell anyone is take it to Staples, have them throw on a spiral cover and a piece of laminate, and that will save a lot of books that people are worried about.
Oh my gosh. Have you tried the TerraSlate paper? Have you heard of this?
Is that the printable waterproof
Yes.
paper?
Oh my gosh, I love
I
it.
have heard of it from people who are more on the deck than I am at this point. I think the piece I had heard was it depends on the quality of the ink you use, right? Like you
Yep.
can't use inkjet or one of the
You can
two.
only use laser printers,
Right.
and it is life changing. It's super expensive. I mean,
Is it?
it's $1 a sheet for an 8 millimeter,
Sure.
but
Okay.
it's amazing. It'll last forever. It's great. It's so good. It's so good.
Okay. The big one that's been trending here the last couple summers was that thin foam you can get at the dollar store.
Oh yeah.
So it's a little bit more of an investment piece, and I had seen it come up primarily with parent and taught in preschool,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a shorter lesson, much more simple on the detail. But that one person I know has a ring of these foam sheets, and they're color coded. You know, day 1 is pink, day 2 is yellow, and so even having them lost on the pool deck, everybody knows who they are, and they go back
That's
to
really
the right
cool.
person.
And you can print on them?
Mm-hmm. No, we're talking handwriting, but I believe she said she does it with, some TV on in the background at home at night. She just prints out her paper lesson plan, gets a fine tip Sharpie, and it does hold up really well. So it's worth the time investment of handwriting it, depending on what it is.
See, this is the trading of the toolbox that I absolutely love. I just wrote it down. I'm like, thin foam, I'm going to check this out because that sounds great.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been great to chat with you, and I hope we connect sometime in person. I don't get to Chicago too often, but I'm always looking to meet and see what people are doing. I mean, I guess one last question I should quickly ask is, how did you hear about this Guantanamo business?
They approached me and wanted to purchase the group lesson. So there's a couple tiers for our offerings. Individual, it's just like $200 a year. And then a group one. So if you want to take all the material and use it, or like all the InDesign files and all that, a little bit more expensive. And then now it's opened it up to being able to allow all of your staff to take the online courses, so that you have licenses for like 500 people that can participate. So they approached me and they said, hey, we wanted to buy your program, and we need a W-9. I think it was a W-9. It's a tax form that proves that I'm a registered entity. And then they had to get approval from a purchasing agent, and then the government issued a check and purchased the program. So it was pretty shocking. I was like, okay, and Guantanamo, and specifically like the leisure and something of the Navy. So
the MWR, probably. That's what I was going to ask, is who's using it? They must have a full MWR now. So family rec center resources down there.
Yeah. So that's it. So they were following primarily for the parent taught and the beginning levels, and for the teachers and stuff there. So yeah, pretty exciting. It was pretty wild stuff, which, I think that's fantastic. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We'll speak to you again soon.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Katie.